been mentioned, but, you know, you can't just show up and say, well, it's somebody's fault. You have to go through and financially prove it. And so that is the concept behind this, is to go out, hire another auditing firm for consulting services. Now, I think that's key to understand when we say consulting services. That is because we can, from a consulting service standpoint, we can go through and try to get these questions answered. Mr. Chairman, at this point, just for the board's information, the proposed contract is in the amount of not to exceed $60,000. It is a lot of money. To put that in perspective, we are talking about $26 million multi-revenues. We're talking about a lot of forensic auditing that's going to occur. That's the reason we did try to get the not to exceed amount. But for perspective, Alleghany County's audit costs around $36,000 to $37,000, and that's not a forensic audit like we're talking about, billing services and things of that nature. I do know you start getting into Watauga County for your basic audit services, they're getting to the $60,000 to $65,000 amount. So, you know, one of the things when we sat and interviewed Martin Starnes and Associates is they will provide detailed billing of their hours and services provided. It's not just going to be some type of lump sum amounts that will be charged on a quarterly basis. But they are going to follow up with detailed, itemized billing so that we can be assured that we are getting what we pay for. One of the requirements for the board to know, I mean, they understand that this New River's in financial distress. So the way their contract will work is they will want retainers in increment amounts of $10,000. They're not gonna run up a $15,000 bill and turn around and hope that we pay it. So they would want a retainer of $10,000 as they go through that, and before they continue service, they'd want another $10,000 and so forth and so forth. We do hope that we don't have to use the full $60,000. Larry, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, and as I understood it too, from listening to Mr. Starnes last Thursday, in the time he spoke with the transition board, he said that we'd start with $10,000. We would, as we approach that, somewhere in the neighborhood of $8,500 or something, we'd stop, we'd give you what we found out, what our investigation has uncovered to this point. Do you want us to go forward? And if so, we'll continue on with another $10,000 retainer. And as we approach that limit, then we'll come back and we'll try to keep you, we will keep you advised of what we're finding and what's being uncovered. And I'd like to, you used the right word, and I know a lot of folks are talking about investigation. We being the transition board right now, New River is under investigation for alleged Medicaid fraud. These folks, Starnes seem to have the teeth, I'd say, to be able to do an investigative forensic report. I was kind of impressed by Mr. Starnes, and he seemed to be, he had experience working with the SBI before in the Alleghany County Sheriff's case, because I did bring that up, the fact that we were considering the SBI. And his advice at that point was, they'll be fine. I've worked with the SBI before. However, the SBI will want to know if there's something there they need to look at. And they will say to an auditing firm, let's see your reports. What are you finding? If you're finding anything bad, then we'll come in. If not, then we don't have too many resources. There's, I think, about 8 SBI agents that work in the state, all over the state.
The forensic agents.
The forensic agents. I understand it's kind of white-collar crime or something of that nature. And so, if they find anything, it's, you know, we need to pursue it.
Well, a couple of things that I caution everybody on this right here. I know it's easy to stand up and accuse people here and there. What I can tell you right now, as of right now, you know, we're gonna question management, we're gonna go through and look at procedures and protocol and things of that nature, but as of right now, I can't tell you that I've seen anything that rises to the level of criminal. Now, also, you know, so I'm very reluctant to use harsh words like that. I understand everybody wants to do it, but you have to, I'm not gonna use those words until it's proven one way or another. And that's what I would recommend most people to handle this, is that you try to get a forensic firm in here to answer these basic questions and you proceed on. Another thing to talk about this is the existing Mountain Church, okay? A couple of things. We have been in conversation with the local government commission, okay? And, you know, the LGC, Mountain Church's existing audit contract with New River, you know, the LGC is somewhat of a participant in that too. So the LGC will be involved in this process in regards to working and dealing with Mountain Church. Okay. So, you know, at this point, what we're looking to do is get the management and the know-how inside New River to start truly trying to vet these questions. And these questions are based upon what we've been hearing, what people have been coming by my office and asking these questions. And it's things, these are basic questions that we think not only elected leaders want to know, but concerned citizens want to know. And hopefully we can get these questions answered. I just want to caution everybody that this is why we want to go hire somebody, before we jump to conclusions of whether it's criminal or if it's the former CFO's fault or if it's the, I can't tell you that answer at this point, but hopefully if we are able to hire a qualified firm to come in there and look at that, we'll be able to answer those questions at a later date.
Okay, this proposal, they're looking at the current most pass audit only, correct? They're not going back any further than 1 year. And I think it's no big secret, New River was in trouble before that, so they really need to go back to about 2007 when the ship started sinking. And I don't think really you're gonna uncover a lot here other than they're out of money, they were living from paycheck to paycheck. Yes, maybe they had some procedures or things that could have been handled a little different. Maybe their billing wasn't that great. But I really don't think you're gonna undercut or discover what you're looking for just looking at this one particular year.
Well, all depends on what you look, I mean,
Well,
you know, it
Well,
depends.
for instance, really in 2007, when they started losing money, you know, and they shifted fund balance around in 2008, you know, but that's when they were losing money. And when New River was shifting fund balance, to cover those losses, they burned through their fund balance until they were out of cash. And then they, you know, from what I see, never really changed operating and started accruing liabilities and dug themselves a hole. And they were living from Medicaid payment to Medicaid payment, and once they got froze, they were done.
A couple things that, I don't know if this is necessarily an end-all be-all. The reason I'm telling you, you gotta start where we're at, and you gotta work yourself back to it, okay?
I agree,
And
I'm
so-
just saying though, with 60,000, you're gonna burn through 60,000 pretty quick in this 1 year, but I don't think you're gonna undercover the true cause of what happened.
Well,
That's why I was
I
suggesting.
mean, we can sit there back and forth. I can only tell you that we can hire a qualified firm to go in there and start looking at it. The things, there is nothing magical. I can only explain how it was explained to us from the auditor standpoint. Something magically didn't change from June 30th, okay, 2011 to July 1, 2011, okay? Excuse me, and that's coming up to this past audit, and then when you go back, you gotta realize, we're actually looking, this is going back. You've got 10 and 11, he's saying going back to June 30th, 2010. So, all right, so right now, we're in 11 and 12. So he's talking about looking at 11 and 12, July, August, September, October, November. Then he's talking about looking at 10 and 11, which is all last year. Then he's talking about going to 9, 10. Now, June 30th, 2010 is fiscal year 9 and 10, okay? So I'm just only describing how it's explained to us. So what you've got is you've got potentially, you got a whole year, and then you've got the year that we're in, and then if you notice what he says, if necessary to interview the audit firm or going back to June 30th, 2010. And I guess his point is it's going to, if there are management issues, policies issues, if it relates to the auditor or the CFO, then it's not gonna magically, it's not like as of June 30th, 2010, everything was fine and dandy, and then July 1, 2010, everything changed. So I guess my point, what I'm trying to say, John, is that's as far as we can imagine going back, and if there are some significant management issues or management problems or audit or CFO or things of that nature, that is taking you into another fiscal year. That is going back and looking at that. Now, I understand you're saying going all the way back to 7, 8, 9, but this is, right now, is hopefully we can find what we're looking for. You're right, we could end up there and not find anything wrong, and then the question, they'll look as far as you want, if you wanna spend the money. But I do think this is a little bit more than, it's not as far back as you're saying, but it is going back a little bit further than what a lot of people imagine, because June 30th, 2010 is fiscal year 9, 10.
Larry,
And their business model, didn't really change, you're right. They burned through their fund balance, they burned through their investments, they covered as best they could for a while, and then they didn't have anything else to cover with anymore. Their billing was flawed, because you bill, everybody here knows that, if you bill $100 to anybody, let's say Medicaid, that you're not gonna get $100 in receivables, you're gonna get, I don't know, let's say 40 or 50, But they seem to have projected that they were gonna get the whole $100. And that's flawed. There were lots of flaws, apparently. And again, Mr. Starnes said, well, like Mr. Adams is saying, it didn't just change in one day. You're right, it goes back a year or two, I don't know how far it goes back. But the business model remained pretty much the same. And the mistakes seem to be pretty much year after year, in the same realm anyway.
I got a question, Larry. When y'all were discussing this over the years about involving the SBI, how did the other boards feel?
The
Other members?
They were receptive to it, but also saying, well, let's do this first, and let's have the auditor. This group of, well, really, and what they're doing is investigating. Have this investigator.
I agree, but like I conveyed to you, and I still feel like most people feel this way. They're not going to trust an auditor as much as they would the SBI. I think they need to be involved.
I had a conversation with Sheriff David Edwards last Friday, and I said, how would you get them involved? He had talked to them, but he said, the SBI is not going to get involved unless they believe there's something there. And what you need to do is what Mr. Starnes was saying, dig through it. If you find something that looks bad, tell me, I'll get the SBI involved. Mr. Adams has talked with the SBI and representative, and Sheriff Edwards, and the LGC, I believe. That was Squeaks, or, yeah,
Right.
David's is.
Well, you know, what I'm saying hypothetically, let's say they go through this whole process and they say, we find nothing wrong. I still, personally, I've done the SBI, say looked over everything and we don't see nothing wrong.
Well,
Whether they would agree to do it or not, is, to me, is immaterial. I think they should be requested to do it. And I think it makes people feel more comfortable with what's going on.
Yeah.
It makes me
I
feel more
will,
comfortable.
and I share it.
Because, you know, I'm not saying that these auditors wouldn't do a super job and do exactly what they're supposed to do, but I still don't see somebody from the law enforcement perspective involved in it. I'm not saying they would cover it.
Given what Sheriff Edwards told me, I don't know how to get them involved exactly, except he was saying, well, bring something and we'll get them.
You know, to me, when you're talking about that much money, public money, being involved in something, I don't see how they could decline not to get involved. To me, it's a matter of public trust. I just don't see that happening. And I don't think you have to allege any criminal behavior. I don't see that. You know, I've had that said to me several times, and you know, I worked in law enforcement for 30 years, and I don't feel that way.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of public trust, and that's what we got to establish right here.
They seem to have forgotten whose money they were working. It's the people's money.
Well, I
Whether
think
it's Medicare,
I
the
think
counties
that
or
happens to a
whatever.
lot of people. They forget where they come from, what, you know, it's the whole ball of wax, but, and I'm not saying anybody's done anything criminal.
I'm not even.
I just said, you know, I think it gives you a better rapport
You
with
got
the
some
public.
ideas on how to get them involved, then let's do it.
Well, I just don't, if the service authority there, the 5 commissioners from each county, I think requested them, I don't see them denying. They might not do much other than kind of look over what Martin Starnes does, but I think they need to be involved.
I'll carry that request, or not request, I'll carry that back to you. And in that, Don,
Yeah, the last meeting, we somewhat pretty much told them we thought this would be a conversation. I think what I get from the 5 counties is wanting the same thing as, generally speaking, is what I hear from this board and from citizens in this county. They want to know what happened, if there was something wrong, criminal, they want law enforcement involved, and they just want the answer to these questions. So
that's reasonable.
and so far as involving the SBI, it's my understanding the only 2 ways, and correct me if I'm wrong, those have been in law enforcement longer than for a while, is that the SBI gets involved 1 or 2 ways. That's either the sheriff calls them in, requests them, or the DA. And when I talked to some of the sheriffs, you go directly to the DA, and generally speaking, they go to the sheriff to investigate before the SBI comes in. So I think a big player in this would be, as far as trying to call in the SBI, would be potentially the sheriffs. I mean, if New River came out and made this request, then I would think it would need to be to the sheriff, maybe of Watauga County, because that's where the main office is. I don't know. That was another discussion was having, where does this actually land? You know, we've had those discussions.
The 5 county attorneys have had those
Okay,
discussions.
so then the request maybe would go to the sheriff, I guess. I guess we could write a letter to the SBI, but my understanding is that either law enforcement or the DA request the presence of the SBI. So I'm not really sure. That's why I'm asking you, Steve. Do we ask?
I don't see them, if anybody wrote them in there, I can't see that they would decline to get involved. I just don't see that, because that's what they're there for.
Can we as a board not ask that we
Well,
write a letter to them?
I don't you know? Now, that doesn't mean that they're gonna do it, but I can't see how they could decline. We're talking about bad situation. However it happened.
Is that something, Donna, Ms. Shoemaker could do?
Do whatever you request me to.
I mean, writing a letter is, it's at least it's a step.
Well, you know, I would prefer that it was done by the whole, pack or the 5 counties, but I think it gives it more credibility.
If we did it and then recommend that it be brought forward to the New River Board or sent out to the other 4 counties. We could just send it to the other 4 counties and request they follow suit.
Be more than happy to.
I'd make that motion.
And I'll second it.
Have a motion and a second. Now, explain exactly what the motion is entailing. Is that asking the county attorney to ask the investigation by the SBI?
Yes.
And to request the other 4 counties to consider
To consider the
a
same.
similar.
But at any rate, our county would be making that request, at a minimum.
I think we owe it to the citizens of the county.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Other discussion? Not all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now back to this budget amendment number 13. The $7,428, is that Allegany's proportion of what the Martin Starnes,
Yes, sir, that goes back to the legal sheet that I've given, that goes back to the original, configuration of percentages amongst the counties, so, excuse me, 7,428 is basically 12.38% of $60,000. That 12.38% being our proportionate amount. Now, I would ask before you move on this, that we discuss general fund budget amendment number 14, because, I could go through the explanation, but if we don't have building and finances and people in place, we don't have it all. If we don't have a place for our auditors to step in, and, if we don't have a place for them to go in and meet with our interim, you know, our skeleton staff, as we call it now, then, you know, anyways, that's kind of, that's the reason I think these are somewhat linked
all
together.
right, well, let's kind of set this one aside for 13 and talk about the 2 14s that you have submitted to us, and the one being 115,000, one being 112,000.
Yes, sir. Really, the difference between the two is the amount of 112,000, if everybody will look at this, the 8.5 by 14 sheet, goes back to the original amount requested, going back to our first allocation. And if you go back and look at that, you see that the original amount was 112,654, and then Ashe County was 181,998, and Avery was 88,548, Watauga County 212,366, Wills County $314,454. I know the board can read, but I'm also doing this for the public information too. And then as you can see that far column there, you can see what was actually received from the counties, because if you recall, we had gotten a revised version that may require about $2,000 less than our 112 amount. Well, if you look at the other counties in the original allocation stayed with the original amount requested. So if you sit there and look, Alleghany County gave 110,242, while Ashe County gave 181,998, Avery 88,548, Watauga 212,366, and Welch 314,454. So in essence, out of that total amount, 907,608 that was contributed to New River, the 110,242 does not match up to the 12.38%. it's $2,000 shy because of what the other counties originally gave. So if you go to the budget amendments, budget amendment number 14, the one that's in the amount of $112,654, is going back to the original amount requested. Just for the board's information, Wilkes County has already contributed $314,454. Watauga County has contributed $212,366. This is the second allotment, not the first allotment. And Ashe County did meet today, and they've allocated $181,998. And that is for the second allotment. So the 112, the first general fund budget amendment number 14, amount of 112,654, basically just goes to this original request. But the second general fund budget amendment number 14, the one that's in the amount of 115,066, is if you take the difference between 112,654 and 110,242, that's $2,412. Add that to 112,654, that's the 115,066. In essence, it's two payments that's being presented to you. It's the 112,654, which matches what everybody else is allocating at this point, and then it's adding an additional $2,412 to make up for the shortfall from the original allocation. So,
Talk a little bit about what this would cover. We're
Okay.
talking about payroll.
yeah,
And
it's,
we're also proposing, in essence, a loan against a deed of trust. We won't forget that. We have a deed of trust on the buildings over there. And this would be added to that if we passed it.
that would be correct.
Okay.
Just kind of summarize, ladies and gentlemen, this is a large operation in the sense of dismantling a $26 million business. So things that just happened last week, it feels like 3 months ago for me. So many things are happening in the periods of time that we're dealing with. But since the last time the counties have allocated, here's basically what's been done. Obviously, there was the goal of the transition from October 31st to November 1st. From the set of this, what I've always been told, what I understood to be told from this board, that if it's different, tell me different, was the transition. That wanted to basically be able to provide the services that was previously being provided. So, locally, if you look here, we did have local 11 employees. 11 employees employed here. We had 2 other employees that were more regional, but we had 11 employees here. We had, that worked for New River through October 31st. Out of those 11 employees, 9 of them were hired by Daymark, and they were working November 1st for Daymark, and that's here locally. So as far as just your access to day-to-day services, not getting into the conversation, should have been Lawson, should have been Daymark, things of that nature. It has been accomplished that you could walk in on November 1st and get your services. The other things, in order to try to get long-term, I guess if you want to call it long-term stability, was the real property itself was leased. New River does own real property in multiple counties. The real property itself is leased from present day until June 30th for $3 a square foot annually. How does that compare locally? It is not, I would say it would be just below fair market value, or probably 20 to 25% below fair market value. For example, you don't have a lot of comps here when you start talking about 10,000 square feet of office space, so you gotta really start trying to comp that around. The 2 spaces that I'm aware of, the main space that I'm aware of is social services, in which we pay $4.50 a square foot. That was previously around 3.5. Before we went into this last lease with Mr. Blevins, there was a lot of renovations done to the building, which increased it to 4.5. You can look at, I don't wanna be detailed, the county did have a building that it leased out at about 3.6 a square foot annually. Which that's what is being offered as of right now through the library. And so, again, that's where I'm basing it being below market value, but it's not free. That was done by the New River Service Authority in order to just ensure that the facilities would be there for this new provider at least until June 30th. At the time we were discussing this, we're getting a better grasp of our creditors and things of that nature, but if it's about service, then we gotta make sure that they have access to the facilities for at least a short period of time. Even if we sold the building or whatnot, they can, a new owner could go in and renegotiate with them and do any of that, but that was a primary goal. Other things, as far as employees, obviously, we've, effective October 31st, the vast majority of New River employees obviously are no longer employed by New River. A skeletal crew has been kept on at this point, 10 employees, and we're looking to get that reduced down relatively soon. Just bear with it. I mean, this stuff is moving lightning speed as we can get in. If we're able to get the services of this firm to get in there, we can start better assessing the needs. Because what we really gotta know is the needs of our consulting firm in regards to access to data. And you really just don't wanna go and lay off all your office staff or get it all the way down to 1 or 2 and not keep the key personnel that we need to make sure the questions are answered. So we will be evaluating the staff, and I say we, me as a non-voting member and Larry as a voting member on the New River Board. At the next meeting, the next scheduled meeting is November 18th at 9 a.m. in Wells County. Other things that brought up tonight that the New River Board dealt with last meeting was 2 areas of equipment. One was vehicles and the other was the telemedicine equipment. What we're running into at this point is discussions with the LME and state Medicaid folks. This is something that we're gonna have to bring in the county attorney's on. Donna and the 4 other county attorneys have yet to get involved in this process, but we are gonna have to go through and get a detailed accounting, not a detailed accounting of listing out our assets. We've got those. What we are gonna have to do is look at a detailed accounting of how those assets were funded. Because we are running into issues, potential issues of how they're funded. Perfect example. Criminal Justice Partnership Program. CJPP. This is a state-funded program that comes through the county that actually was operated by New River. New River has gotten this grant through the county for multiple years, and they've used these grant monies to purchase of equipment. That equipment still sits over there. We have gone through, I know some commissioners have been requested of this, so I've just sort of let everybody know. The local staff has gone through, local and regional. This program was overseen by a director out of Ash too from New River. Has identified all the equipment and it's associated that equipment with Alleghany County. So that equipment can't be sold. It's not owned by New River, and Alleghany County should eventually get that back. Steve Roten and I, Commissioner Roten and I have talked about there will be a CJPP board meeting next week, in which eventually this information will get back to this board of commissioners. So I'm trying to use that as an example because there is going to be equipment that potentially was a direct grant fund, and I know people don't wanna hear this, but from Crossroads, that has contracts associated with it, that if you cease to exist, that goes back to X. We can't just turn around and just flat out have a fire sale on all this equipment. So that's what needs to happen, but we also were looking at, the board was looking at continuity of service. Daymark was needing access to some vehicles, so yes, you did hear correctly that a portion of the vehicles will be leased for the next 90 days to Daymark for $1, so relatively no cost. Daymark will assume all liability insurance for it and all maintenance of the vehicles as we go through and try to transition, find out whose vehicles are what. There is another set of equipment called the telemedicine equipment. This equipment is what interconnects, if I understand correctly, interconnects all the facilities regionally. It's what allows doctors from Wilkes County to provide services in Alleghany and things of that nature. It's basically computers and servers, and I'm sure some software involved in it. That one was showed to us by Smoky, that was directly purchased off a grant from Smoky, in which the contract, it says, does have a reversion clause that if you cease to exist, that it reverts back to Smoky. So that was actually given to Daymark. And this all happened, last Thursday, right? That was given to Daymark. That was actually given to Daymark. The vehicles were leased because it's still unclear of how it's funded and things of that nature. We've got to have services to come in and identify funding sources and things of that nature. Both of those decisions were based upon what we've always understood as the primary goal is continuity of services. Those both are very critical in regards to continuing the service. Right now, if they didn't have the vehicles, and I know the question is how come Daymark didn't buy them? I can't tell you which one we can sell to them. I'm talking about from New River's standpoint. When we know which ones we can sell to them, we'll be happy to sell to them, but we've got to get this accounting done. And so right now, as they provide service, there is the idea that they could be transporting patients and things of that nature in private vehicles. It gets real complicated when it gets into liability issues and things of that nature. So those two things have occurred. Where we're going in the future at this point, if you look at this funding, if you recall, the last funding was primary purpose was to make payroll and certain expenses October 15th. Just a reminder to everybody, that October 15th payroll was for the employees through the end of September. What is coming due now, November 15th, is for all those employees who were still New River employees through October 31st, is for that month of payroll. So what we have is is about a $1.293 million payroll that is coming up here November 15th. Other expenses that we still have coming, besides that payroll, is we still have, let me back up a little, we have a significant amount of back payments due to multiple vendors. So realize these discussions right now are trying to keep certain things in place so we can get questions answered. As far as the payroll is concerned, it was my understanding from the board, and if this changes, let me know, that the second priority after continuity of services was to take care of the people. So that's where, and for the most part, that's been the 5 counties' 2 top priorities. So in essence, if you continue with that, then obviously it's going to be a significant cost to make payroll November 15th of $1.293 million. other costs that we're going to have coming up in the future is we still have to make rent in the Boone office. If you look at the Boone Finance Office, that is in a facility that is not owned by New River. And that is something that rent payments need to continue to be made on, along with telephone and power. Very easy to question, well, you own all these other buildings, why don't you just pick it up and move it all over there? Because it's all networked together. It's not as simple as just picking up these tables and moving it over to another building. You would have a decent amount of IT costs and things of that nature. So those will still be upcoming and potentially ongoing expenses. So if you take the funding that's being requested right now, what this will get us through is basically payroll, that's pretty much it. We've had to go ahead and make rent payments. Those rent payments, if we didn't make them, we were gonna get thrown out of these buildings. So, in essence, right now, if you contribute this monies along with the rent payments and certain payments that had the power bill and things of that nature, we're gonna have to make an e-notes. This is the billing software. If you want any chance of going back and recouping past Medicaid billing, we gotta keep certain finances and functions in place. We had to go ahead and make these payments. So once these funds are contributed, what that's done is it makes payroll and it makes the rents and the things that I just mentioned so that we can stay in our finance office. I can go ahead and tell you, come November 21st, this is right after this, in order to finalize the retirement on payroll and realize the rents we just paid was not for 2 months from now, it's back rent. We had to get caught up. Coming up November 21st, there will be an additional request of funds if you choose to go past here, or additional request of funds in an amount that's gonna be approximately between 20 to 25,000, so it's not gonna be the 115,000 like we discussed before, which hopefully, if we don't keep getting these, I don't know if you wanna call them surprises, but costs that pop up that's vital to keeping our finance packages going, then hopefully come the 21st request of $20,000 to $25,000 should get us through Christmas well into January. That we should be down to our skeletal staff. We should be down to the rents there and the power bills there. And at that point, Donna, we're gonna have to start bringing in the 5 county attorneys. Hopefully when we get, assuming everything gets passed, hopefully what can happen is when we start getting a clearer picture from the consultant, that'll start putting the county attorneys in a better position to start talking to us about our liabilities. So none of this, we have not admitted to any liability. Going back, we have set this up as a loan to New River, with the local property being held as the loan being held on the deed of trust on the local property. At this point, we have not admitted any of this as liability. All this is about just trying to keep us going long enough to get to the answers and the question, or get answers to some of the questions people have been asking the whole time. Larry, I'm gonna be quiet.
What is the cap amount on the deed of trust for our local property? And if we were to pass one of these amendments, how would we be in relation to that amount?
If you were to pass the larger amount, the 115,066 plus the 7,428, that is 122,494. That's the maximum amount that we're talking about today.
The maximum amount of deed of trust is $283,100.
Okay, if you add the 122 494 to the 110, let me find the other number, the 110,242 that's already been allocated. Then you will have used $232,736 of the available $283,100 on the deed of trust. And so that's what is that difference, about $50,000. And then again, what I'm saying to you is if you continue here, we'll come back with about $20,000 to $25,000 request the third week of November, November 21st, and then that would leave, after that, would leave about $25,000 remaining on the deed of trust. That's, Larry, I don't know if there's anything else. I'm trying to let y'all know everything I know in regards to.
So again, it's a little bit out of order, but we really need to decide if there's support to do budget amendment 14, right?
14, yes, sir, I think it needs to be somewhat, you maybe can do them simultaneously if you want, because what's gonna happen, this is the agreement, what's going on between 5 counties. All of these other counties have contributed this money, they have deeds of trust too, just so you know. Wilkes County has followed through with a deed of trust, Avery County has followed through with a deed of trust, just like we're looking at here. And I know Ashe County, they're looking to follow through with it too. All of these allocations have been contingent upon the other counties following through. So if, that's what I would ask that you do it the same way. So if we don't have the available funds for the salaries, and or rent and the audit, my point is, if we just don't have it there, then there's no real reason to have an audit. Now, you could argue, should we make our last payroll? If the 5 counties chose not to make the last payroll, which is owed and due to those employees, then, yeah, that kind of frees up a little bit of money.
But it is for services that they did in October.
Yes, sir.
Well, let's do them separately. Let me see if there is a motion on budget amendment number 14, which is a total of 115,066.
Have we heard any, I'm sorry,
No, go ahead.
have we heard any complaints, I guess, from the other, I haven't heard it, but any complaints from the other counties that we only paid $110,000 instead of $112,000?
Other than they know that we haven't paid our fair share and that
But we've
that
been
we
paying
told
more
them
than
that
our
we
fair
would,
share
that,
for quite some time.
that we told them that it would be corrected. Follow up, Larry, you were there, I mean, we told them and we said we'd bring this back before the board. this month.
Well, really, we're paying more than our fair share to start with.
That's what I see it, yeah.
So, I mean, that's very obvious.
You know, that percentage goes back to the agreement.
I agree, but it should never happen.
Again, I'll ask for a motion on that budget amendment number 14 for the 115,066.
For purposes of discussion, I'll make the motion that we pass that budget amendment.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Have a second, have a motion and a second, discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Any opposed? Now we go to budget amendment number 13, which is again the $7,428, which would be to retain the services of Martin Starnes. Again, that would be budget amendment number 13, $7,428. Is there a motion on that?
And I'll make that motion on one condition, that Alleghany County freezes its participation on the Smoky Mountain Board pending the outcome of our investigation. participate actively on the Smoky Mountain Board until we find out from our investigation, whether it be through the SBI or through the audit services, the outcome. See if there is any liability, maybe that Smoky Mountain didn't act properly. I just think since, you know, they're under investigation, I don't think we should actively have an active role on their board. Now, if everything goes fine, then we pick up and go, you know, in the future.
Well, isn't that about to cease to exist anyway?
It's got one more year,
A full year?
I
I
believe
thought
so.
it was gonna cease the first this coming year.
I don't think that's true.
I mean,
From what I've heard,
That's
you know, that's not, that
That's
was a
not true.
proposal by a certain group. But I
Okay.
need to talk to you about that, but no, it'll be talked about at the legislature, the county commissioners association will oppose it.
So nothing's been done.
No.
I don't have a problem with your motion, John, I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Now, what it actually does is, of course, it's aimed at me. It's aimed at getting me off of that board. I hate that that's the tactic that's being used, because as far as I'm concerned, Dr. Khan and I both serve on the Smoky Mountain Board. We do so in the best interest of the citizens and the clients that use the mental health services, and to use this leverage, which it ought to stand by itself. If this is not good enough to stand by itself, then the motion that's being proposed is a backdoor process to get me off the board.
Well, if I was making a motion to take you off the Smoky Mountain Board, I would make that motion. I wouldn't use it as a backdoor process.
But
I
if,
really think at this particular point, honestly, you know, going through and to see the way Smoky handled it, I think we need to be cautious with them. That's my concern there. And I think at this particular time, you know, it would make sense, just pending the outcome of this investigation. Now, it may be that, you know, everything's fine, and then so be it, I'll admit, you know, I was wrong, we shouldn't have done it, and then we'll roll on. But I think at this particular point, I believe that's the way to go, and I believe that's in the best interest of the people of Alleghany County.
but what happens is that you no longer have anyone speaking for Alleghany County. That's a part of the Smoky Mountain Board.
I understand that.
And I think, again, that hurts us from not having some representation to be able to present our case on asking for assistance from Smoky Mountain. Now, again, I have no problem with the fact that there is criticism on my part as far as what Smoky Mountain might be doing. But you have to remember that there have been other board members, especially when the decisions were being made about the Medicaid waiver, that was decided by the previous commissioner and Dr. Khan. So to try to tie me in with that and to take away the voting authority or the representation, I think is short-sighted. I just think that takes away and indicates a negative approach to being able to represent the board and voice an opinion one way or the other as far as what Smoky Mountain is doing. How best can we determine what's going on in Smoky Mountain if we don't have a board member or two board members going to these meetings?
I understand the motion, John. I was gonna say, we don't need to diminish our representation there. I have learned in a very short time that you really don't need to extend all your trust to Smoky Mountain. And I think we need eyes and ears there talking for Alleghany and paying attention to what they're doing and talking to Mr. Ingram and trying to steer him in the right way. just think they need watching.
Well, I agree with you on that aspect, Larry, but and Mr. Chairman's brought this up, and I've never said anything about it. I think, you know, the accusations are being thrown around, and it behooves me that he's not willing just to stand up and step down.
That's right.
I mean, that's what I would do if I was involved in this
Absolutely.
situation. And I'm not saying he's done anything wrong at all. Not accusing nobody of nothing, I don't do that.
That's right.
But still, it's a matter of perception. And, you know, I think that's something you should strongly consider.